as a kid growing up playing basketball and to now be working with the top basketball players in the world. Everything you eat and drink becomes the fuel for everything your body does. It's okay to eat ice cream, and it's okay to live life and have a quality of life while still trying to optimize your health and achieve your goals. Your body will show you what it doesn't like, but you just have to be paying attention to those messages. Being a nerd and being an athlete, I thought I'd combine the two.
All right, Emily, here we are on the Know Your Physio podcast. Before we rabbit hole into any of these topics in the world of physiology, nutrition, high performance, I want to welcome you and say thank you for joining us here today. While there's many topics that I look forward to exploring in just a moment here, why don't we start with why? Why do you do what you do, and why are you joining us here on the show today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think the why I do what I do is as simple of an answer as I just love to help people. I think that's what got me along the path that I eventually took towards where I am now. I think my version of helping people based off of what I've found that I love to learn about is all through, health and wellness and longevity. So that's my why.
And how did you arrive in this career path? Why did it make sense to you to help people through nutrition, applied science, physiology, high performance? How and why did that make sense?
Well, when I was dissecting a cat in high school anatomy, I realized how much I loved anatomy and physiology. I was just so fascinated by it. And then knowing I already knew that, and I wanted to help people. And so I was what every kid that loves anatomy in high school does is thought I'd be a doctor, and, focused my career path on that. And then realized in college that organic chemistry and physics were not my forte. But physiology was. And so being a nerd and being an athlete, I thought I'd combine the two and learn as much as I possibly could about exercise physiology. And along the way, I discovered a passion for nutrition and the recognition that I played basketball in college a little bit, and through my whole adolescence, I played basketball and sports and everything. And I was I'm 20 years old and I've never had anybody talk to me about nutrition or the importance of nutrition for health or performance. It kind of blew my mind that I was I've been in so many different realms of athletics, and the most I ever had was an athletic trainer showing me a P chart and talking about hydration briefly. So I was you know what, it'd be really interesting to start learning more about nutrition. And so that's why I decided to go on and do a master's in it, and then pair that eventually with a PhD in kinesiology, so that I would have that dual expertise of the two things that I think go so totally hand in hand. And then it was just serendipity that I ended up with a job in the NBA, which is obviously a dream for me as a kid growing up playing basketball, and to now be working with the top basketball players in the world. It's a real honor, and it still drives me every day.
Yeah, and I'd say that we definitely there's so much overlap in our missions and in our why, which is why I think it'll be so much fun to dive into this show with you, except I don't like dissecting cats as much as you do. No, but all jokes aside, you are now working with these high performers, but what has that taught you about what most people need to know to feel and perform their best? I, like you, love working with the elites and helping them get 1 to 10% better, right? Whatever it takes to get that edge. But what has that taught you about most people? What do most people need to know about their physiology?
As much as possible. It's hard to narrow it down to specifics because, number one, even researchers don't know everything there is to know about physiology. We're still trying to crack all the codes, but there's a lot, and I've seen it just absolutely skyrocket in terms of what people can learn about themselves. Over the past 10 years, that development has vastly expanded. I think I'm still catching up to it, honestly. When you go through academia, you kind of get a little bit of tunnel vision, especially a PhD, because they're pick a single topic and write the biggest paper of your life on it. And you kind of forget to, not that you forget, you are in a situation where you have to spend so much time thinking about like one specific thing that when you get out of that, you're just like, okay, I answered this topic, or I attempted to, but there's like hundreds of thousands of millions of other topics. So I think when it comes to what people need to know about their physiology is start with the basics, like gain a baseline foundational understanding of, like, if we're talking about athletes, talking about the different, not to get to biochemistry, but like macronutrient metabolism, and just start with the macros and then get into the micros and then talk about supplements. And like, you can kind of, like you said, rabbit hole on everything. But yeah, just as much as possible. Like, if you find a love for learning, like you're gonna want to know as much as you can.
And while I just want to add to your point that while the PhD, the process of getting your PhD, it is, I haven't done it, but I can imagine that it's very much, you narrow your field of vision, but at least it teaches you what it takes to learn about anything at that level of depth. You can appreciate the work of other PhDs. You know what it takes, and you know that when a PhD publishes a paper, how much work went into that paper, Yep. So I think it's less about what you're actually learning. It's more of like learning about the process of learning and establishing science. That is, in my opinion, the most valuable thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually recently asked, like, what would I recommend to younger athletes as far as learning about nutrition or what they need to know? And I was like, if I could pick one thing, it's how to separate the BS from credible. It's like, if you learn how to seek out credible information, that's going to lead you down a better path than just trying to learn about specific topics. Like, if you can't even figure out what's accurate or coming from these credible sources, then it doesn't matter what you learn.
How do we seek out credible information? Can you give us a crash course on it?
It used to be as easy as just like, what website are you on? Does it end in .com or .edu or .org? But like nowadays, you can buy domain names with a .org and just be a private business. And like, that doesn't mean you're necessarily credible anymore. So, and you could also be a .com and have, a completely credible person writing that content. So I think if I'm going to say an easy way is to like, just look at who is doing the talking and what credentials do they have to be speaking on the topics which they are. I think having degrees, like credentials, nationally certified credentials in specific areas is really important. Not to say that experiential learning doesn't teach people a lot, and somebody who learned from someone who has a PhD can't like relay a message. But I think it's a really slippery slope that it's just better to teach people to go directly to the source of the credible person than the subsequent like 20 people who are just touting that same message.
And what do you think about, for example, doctors who never see a course in nutrition, but because they're doctors, end up writing a book about nutrition? And doctor wrote a book about nutrition. Let's listen to this doctor. What do you have to say about that?
Like I said, there's no hard and fast rule of credibility. Like, it's hard because I run into that a ton. And like even cross disciplines of, strength and conditioning talking on nutrition. And again, I'm not saying that these people cannot be educated in nutrition, that they can't have experience in it. And maybe if you don't, maybe they've never taken a nutrition course or whatever, and they decide to write a book on something because they have a broader credential that they think allows them to cross over those like lanes. I'm going to give the benefit of a doubt to, like, if a doctor writes a book about nutrition, I'm going to assume that they at least have some knowledge of physiology to the point that they are not going to make harmful recommendations. But that's definitely not a hard and fast rule. There are plenty of physicians out there who are speaking on things and about things in ways in which they should not. And luckily, I think there's enough credentialed people who are willing to speak out against that when it happens. So yeah, it's hard. Like I always say, like, don't just believe one source. Even if it's a credentialed source, even if it's me, like, don't just believe me. Go out and look at other people who are talking about the same topic and gain different perspectives on it and come to your own conclusions.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard of, there's a website and an organization called Red Pen Reviews. Have you heard about it?
That sounds familiar.
So Red Pen Reviews publishes the most informative, consistent, unbiased health and nutrition book reviews available free of charge, and they exist to help you evaluate the information quality of the books you read or are thinking about buying. And so, for example, there's a book here. There's a book that I read a while back. I think it's called Grain Brain, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. That sounds familiar.
And so like what they did is they had like their whole team go in and check every single reference and the validity of the studies, like the efficacy of the studies, the quality. It's like, and then they give their score, right? So I think in this day and age, when you can literally buy a .org, right? Like, for example, my company is we have a .org website, and while we strive to be the most credible, most of us are just up and coming professionals. We're not PhDs or experts in anything. But the point is that just about anyone can publish anything, and nowadays with the leverage that we can gain online with any kind of credibility, it's very easy to overstep boundaries. And I like Red Pen Reviews because it's kind of will bring you back down to earth, and will give you that kind of perspective and show you what is rooted in research, so that you're not just buying into hype. And I'm sure they have their own biases too. They actually end up writing their own books. So, everyone has a bias, but as scientists, I think, and I know that you'll agree here, that we're really, as long as we stay skeptical and as long as we're constantly making the effort to limit our biases, then I think people can and should take us seriously. But whenever we are, relying on our biases to make a profit, that is probably the most dangerous thing that a scientist can do. And I'm sure that that this topic, we can probably do several podcasts on it, but I really admire your mission to make this such a simple and effective way of thinking for people to understand right from wrong. And if they don't know right from wrong, at least where to look. So I really appreciate that. And, that being said, what are some of your favorite places to learn and stay in, to learn and to stay on top of the best and latest research on nutrition?
Yeah. So I'm a member of the Collegiate and Professional Sport Dietitians Association, or CPSDA. It's a community of exactly what its name entails. It is dietitians working in the collegiate, professional, or tactical settings. And it's relatively new. It's like only a 12-year-old organization, but they do a great job of releasing like a monthly research report. And it is an accumulation of new nutrition and athletics research every month. So I start there and I see if there's anything in that list. It's usually a pretty big list that I deem applicable to my practice, or maybe a private client has asked me a question about it, like something I want to learn a little bit more. So that will lead me directly to the studies themselves, which is great. But if I need to seek out a specific topic and look for a quick summary, I'll use examine.com. I think that's a really great website who does a good job of, like I said, accumulating the research that exists on a specific topic all into one concise summary. And again, listing all the references so that if I feel like I was saying, I don't just trust one website. Like if they say something about a specific study and I'm like, I wonder how they ran that study, I'm going to go look at the research itself and do a little more digging. So yeah, that and the American College of Sports Medicine is a similar, that's an organization that also they have monthly journals or maybe quarterly journals. I don't know. I get those in the mail, even though I've tried to sign up for the emails every time I get one because I hate wasting paper. But I'll look through that and see if there's, again, anything that jumps out. I just try to stay in tune to when the journals that I trust are putting out position stands or any sort of review paper. I think nowadays review papers are like one of the utmost like best ways to understand research, understand any specific topic. Like systematic reviews and meta-analyses are pretty much the only papers I read nowadays. I will very rarely read a full clinical trial study unless it's on something that's so new that they don't have a review paper on it yet. So yeah, that's what I'll do.
Would you mind reminding my audience what that means? What is a systematic review and a meta-analysis?
Okay.
Why should they be looking at those when they're doing their research?
Yeah. So when you conduct research, you have to choose how you are going about it, right? So, and you could do a trial that is like, I'm going to get X number of participants to do this for 30 days, and we're going to look at these measures. And that's typically, let's call that a clinical trial, right? When you combine a bunch of clinical trials, so from different authors, different across the world, that all ask the same question, because there's so many people across the world doing research that it's never just like one person is looking into something at one time. If you compile those clinical trials and you actually compile the data that they collected, you increase the sample size, which is great, and we love that. And that is a meta-analysis. So you are kind of running the same trial again, except the data has already been collected and you are compiling data from across the world, the nation, wherever you may be getting data from. So that's a meta-analysis. The difference with a systematic review is that you are not gathering the already collected data of a systematic review, but you are still combing through the research that already exists on a topic, and you are compiling it into one giant summary to try to answer a question. So those are done if you can't get access to the data from all these studies, or maybe your question is too broad and the data are too specific. You do a systematic review. So it's a big old summary of they try to find any paper that's been written on a specific topic within a specific year frame, because you don't want to go back too far, because then you're opening up a can of worms. So yeah, a good summary.
Thank you so much for that. And by the way, I just quickly I navigated to the examine.com website, and I feel as if I've been living under a rock because it's my first time.
Because you know it.
I had no idea this was a thing. Wow.
Yeah, and I don't even pay. There's a subscription version that I have no idea what extra benefits it gives you. I just use the free version, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it says here, so they have no ads or industry ties. They use the latest evidence to find what works and what doesn't. And there's a search engine. It's you can look up stuff as if to me, it seems like just at first glance, a more user-friendly version of Google Scholar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for taking us through that. I'm curious, I'm curious about timeline and why it made sense for you to get involved in timeline. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you guys are doing through timeline?
Sure. So it made sense for me to get involved with timeline because they are a science first company. So I've been working with the Philadelphia 76ers this is my 4th season. And during my 2nd season, one of my athletes was working with a very world-renowned dietitian by the name of Louise Burke. And she had recommended he start utilizing Timeline, the supplement Mitochondria. And as part of my job, I had to look into it and make sure that it was something that was safe and efficacious and whatever. And this Louise Burke is a goddess in my world. So she could tell me to eat dirt and I would do it. So it's not like I was fact checking her. I trust her wholeheartedly. But I was just curious because it's new, and it was even more new at the time. So when looking into it a little bit more, we decided we wanted some more players to utilize it. And I literally just emailed the customer service email and was like, y'all do wholesale discounts? And next thing I know, I was on a call with the chief medical officer and chief marketing officers, and which is common for me that they want to send the big guns to talk to me. Cool. Love that. But by the end of the call, they were talking to me about a potential job with them. And the reason that I even considered it was because they were seeking out a person to do something that I love, which is translation, knowledge translation, research translation to both the lay person and physicians and practitioners. And that's like a huge part of my personal mission is like, how do we translate what's like really complicated to someone who might not understand really complicated?
Excuse me, making science sexy.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
We're making science sexy, because science isn't really. Look, I love systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Okay, that gets me excited, but it's not exciting to the people that actually need them. So we have to translate it. We have to make science sexy. That's what you do.
100%, and I'm using that from now on. So it's gonna go on my resume. So so they wanted to hire me to make science sexy, and I was like, bet, let's do this. Also, before signing on with them, I did a deep dive into their company, every board member, the founder. Like, I wanted to know, are there any red flags? Because like, I never in a million years saw myself working with a supplement company. Even just 2 years ago, it was my understanding of the supplement world was such a dark place that I was like, I just don't have any desire of associating with this kind of world. Like, I use supplements, my athletes use supplements, and that's fine. But, to work for a company like that, I thought that was wild. So, so after my deep dive, found no red flags. Like, I was like, all right, I might as well, get into this. And I'm beyond thankful that I did, because not only do I wholeheartedly believe in the company and the product and the nutrient and all of that, but it has exposed me to a world of people that I never knew existed in this like biohacking crowd. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, it has educated me on really just like the plight of humans and like how many people are dealing with things and seeking out science in ways that I never recognized, because I was in such like a sport bubble. Mm-hmm. And the field of sport nutrition is like so different from the field of like biohacking and functional medicine and like that kind of realm. Because I don't know, like the two worlds actually like conflict a lot. And so for me, I found it really intriguing to try to be someone to find a middle ground, a compromising meeting point between the two worlds, because I do think they both can coexist and should coexist.
Right. So you're putting the bio in biohacking. You're really showing people the science of life and what it takes in this modern day to live the life that nature intended, because it's difficult, right? With all these modern stressors, these modern environments, the stuff that's going into our body and affecting our mitochondrial function, which lays the foundation for all other function, right? So it only makes sense that you're trying to find this middle ground, making science sexy and involved in this awesome company. So can you tell us a little more about what is MitoPure and how does it actually work at the level of the mitochondria? Why do we need to take something like this? Why does it make sense, especially in this modern day?
Okay. Buckle up. It's not a short story.
I'm buckled up.
So
let's do it.
Let's start at the mitochondria, right? Like cool. Everybody's heard of the mitochondria. It's probably the most well-known organelle we have within our cells. And everybody knows it to be the powerhouse of the cell. And a lot of people like think that it's just, they think of like the bicep flexing emoji and like power and like whatever, but it literally means power, space, home, like house, right? So it's where our energy, our power is created. What happens over time is our mitochondria become dysfunctional, which like it has hundreds of functions. So when I say dysfunctional, I am not being specific. I'm being like very broad. It can become dysfunctional in one of its 100 different pathways, right? But as that happens, one of the things that occurs is we often can create less energy. So less adenosine triphosphate, ATP, as I'm sure your audience probably already knows. So we cannot stop this decline in mitochondrial function. Age induces it, stress induces it. And those are two things we literally cannot avoid. So where timeline comes in is they have found a nutrient that was originated in pomegranates that induces the mitochondrial recycling process called mitophagy. Okay. So the mitochondria, being as important as they are within the cell, they have a life cycle of themselves that is separate from the cellular life cycle. So a lot of people know autophagy, the cellular recycling process. Your mitochondria do the same thing. And so what happens is when this nutrient is introduced into the system, which it's not a new thing. Our bodies can make it ourselves when we eat the right precursor foods. So it's nothing abnormal or synthetic that is triggering a process that we don't typically do. It's just ramping up that process. So if we can recycle more of our dysfunctional mitochondria, we can create space for new and fresh mitochondria that are better at doing their jobs. And then, like you said, the mitochondria are the basis of so many physiologic functions that it has this really great snowball effect of positive outcomes because we are just refreshing that powerhouse.
Right. And what are some areas of the body that have the highest concentrations of mitochondria, and therefore by optimizing our mitochondria, we can expect the greatest benefit in these areas?
Muscle, heart, brain, eyes, kidneys, I think is up there. We're talking thousands of mitochondria per cell.
It's interesting because I'm sure most people tuning in have seen a picture, a diagram of a cell with like a couple mitochondria in it, but there's thousands.
Thousands. I know, which I didn't even fully realize, but if you think about it, it totally makes sense, right? Like, what parts of our physiology require the most energy and the most consistent energy? It's our muscles to move us. It's our brains to keep us alive. It's our hearts to keep that blood pumping. Like, the body is evolutionarily designed to keep itself alive. So we need the most energy coming out of the most vital things.
Right. I'm just thinking back. I'm reflecting back on, like fifth grade when I had to make like a cell like cake. I don't know if you had to do something similar.
Yes.
And you had to, create all the little parts of the cell. I could, like, reflecting back, I'm just trying to imagine if I had to make thousands of mitochondria. I would have probably never taken up the project to begin with.
No, it would have been a whole cake.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. And so why does this ingredient in pomegranates, like why does that make sense?
So the way it came about was the research branch that created Timeline was looking into pomegranates back in I think it was 2008 when everybody was touting how much of a superfood pomegranates are. And they were like, okay, let's figure out why, which is nobody did that. I don't know. So they decided to look into it. And what they found was our gut microbiome converts the L-argitannins in pomegranates, which is a polyphenol. It converts those L-argitannins into urolithins, which urolithin A is the most prominent and does the actual mitophagy induction. Mm-hmm. So the problem is, they did that research and they're like, oh my God, great. We found what is potentially the reason that pomegranates are such a longevity food. Let's just get people to eat more pomegranates, or, what do we do with this? What they found in further research was that only about 1 in 3 people can actually do that gut conversion in any meaningful quantity. So that's 60% of the population that straight up just really can't do that conversion. You could eat all the pomegranates, drink all the pomegranate juice that you want, and you're still going to get micro amounts of urolithin A.
Hold on, if I can quickly interrupt you, which I want to try to avoid, but in this case, is there proof that those people, while they can't produce that, while they don't have the gut microbiome, do they need to have it to get the same quality of the same benefit? What if they've adapted to just lower turnover, and their body functions optimally without it?
That's a great question. I think in order to answer that, we need to have a measure of what is optimal function.
Right.
So without which I personally, I don't even know what that would be. Because of all the different paths that the mitochondria are involved in. I think that's kind of an impossible question to answer.
Right. So that's a difficult thing to specify. However, what if we can measure the activity of mitochondria? You're talking right now about at the level of the gut, right? Do those people actually have impaired ATP production as a result?
Probably not. So everyone experiences mitochondrial decline, regardless of their ability to convert precursor foods into beneficial nutrients, right? So I wouldn't say that the people who can't do that natural gut conversion would have worse mitochondrial decline than someone who could. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, they might, but then we also have to assume that those who can do that gut conversion are eating the right precursor foods consistently. Mm-hmm. So, which like we know they probably aren't. And the what they found within that same research of like why are some people converters and others aren't can be broadly defined as just gut microbiome diversity. Mm-hmm. Which especially in the US and the Western Hemisphere, like we have diets that have just destroy people's gut microbiome diversity. So like it's kind of safe to assume that most people are not going to be good producers of urolithin A by eating the precursor foods alone.
Right. And so by adding this in, do they automatically optimize the gut microbiome's ability to support the mitochondria?
I mean, not just the gut microbiomes, like the supplemental version of urolithin A, which is Timeline's MitoPure, is completely bioavailable. So you surpass the gut microbiome's issues to get urolithin A into the bloodstream. But to your point, the gut also has mitochondria, so they are going to be positively affected by a higher concentration of urolithin A in the bloodstream, but it's not like it's just targeting the gut. It's going to be everywhere.
And in that theoretical third of individuals who already have, a good foundation and they can, they have a good microbiome, they can use urolithin A, they have decent mitochondria. Is there any potential negative detriment that they might see if they have, let's say, I don't know, a surplus of mitochondria or a surplus of mitochondrial function? Can that be negative at all?
No. I don't think you're ever going to have a surplus of mitochondria because the body's not going to allow for that. I've never heard of a case of like too much mitochondrial biogenesis, except for, I guess you could argue like tumor formation might have that, yeah. But like the excess of urolithin A is not causing excess mitochondria to occur it's not causing biogenesis. It's causing mitophagy, which is clearing out the debris, right, and taking out the trash essentially.
Right. You're not getting more trash cans. You're taking out the trash.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
If someone starts taking this, what kind of outcomes can they expect?
The clinical trials that we have in human populations have shown improvements in muscular strength, muscular endurance, VO2 peak, reductions in inflammatory markers like CK and CRP. Those trials have been in middle-aged and older adults. We're working on publishing a trial that we did at the Australian Institute of Sport in elite athletes. So kind of seeing like, are athletes really at a mitochondrial ceiling, or does this also potentially help them? And then beyond that, all of those like clinical results, those are what we see at like the 4-month mark of taking MitoPure daily. But when we talk to people who have begun taking MitoPure, and I can even attest to this myself, like within 2 weeks, you start to feel not different, but just like, for me, it was fatigue. Like I used to be a midday nap person that like come 2-3 o'clock, I was legitimately exhausted. And then I kind of realized after a couple of weeks of taking MitoPure that I was like, oh, I don't feel so tired anymore. I feel like I have more like mental clarity, throughout the day. Other people that I've spoken to report just recovering better from their workouts, both in like their like cardiovascular side of things as well as muscle soreness side of things. And all of that, within the first like 2 to 4 weeks. So yeah, that's what I would say people can expect.
And yeah. I know that while it's difficult to see meaningful change in elite populations, those are the kind of people that, they undergo so much testing where you can see something meaningful, even if it's 1 to 10%, right? So that being said, what can your average consumer expect? Would you say that it's similar in the sense that they can expect, let's say, better recovery, or they don't have this midday crash, or is that reserved for, is that a measurable? Is that only measurable in the elites when you undergo this kind of, testing? Can an average person see a significant result?
So all of the results that I mentioned were done in average people. So
everyday people.
Everyday people. It was middle-aged and older adults. So it's like two separate studies, basically conducted the same way, just in two different aged populations. So all of these people were just generally healthy, no chronic disease states present. There was no diet intervention. There was no exercise intervention. It was just like, live your life, but add this supplement into it, and then we'll test every so often. And they found the increases in muscular strength, muscular endurance, the inflammatory marker reduction, all of that just in everyday people.
In this modern day, there are a few habits, lifestyle systems, and biohacks that will sort of like set the stage for physiological excellence. Like, you can give the body the opportunity to take care of itself. Do you think that Urolithin A, Mitopure, that it actually accomplishes this?
Theoretically, yes. As I mentioned, number one, the body already knows what Urolithin A is, because you can get it from food precursors that you've probably had at some point in your life. So to me, that is a good sign that like naturally we produce this. And so it is a familiar thing. On top of that, it's triggering a process that is also extremely familiar to the body. Mitophagy is happening right now. It's happening every single day, every single second of every single day, right? You have thousands of mitochondria. They are going to be recycled because that's a more energy efficient way of saving them than to completely kill them off and create new ones. So those two things combined tell me that if we aren't introducing anything new to the body, but we are just optimizing a process, I believe that the downstream effects of that are just optimization in like every other area in which the mitochondria are involved. It's like the most foundational way to optimize.
Right. I like that description. It's like way upstream of everything else. Like, it'll make every other healthy input better. That's awesome. And then on the other end of the spectrum, what are some habits that destroy mitophagy?
Mitophagy specifically, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. I would assume it's the same kind of habits that just destroy mitochondria and your health in general, which is like having a crappy diet, not exercising, so like living a sedentary life, alcohol, smoking, all of those kinds of things that have all of those negative effects. Yeah, I would say those probably, but I can't speak to like specifically targeting mitophagy in a specific way.
Let me ask you this. I have a series of questions that I want to ask you, but this kind of reflects back on the beginning of this show, which is about you and your story. In the process of working with Timeline and Mitopure and with mitochondria, what have you learned about your mitochondria that you wish you had known like way earlier in your life? Independent of Urolithin A, what's something that you wish you knew earlier about your mitochondria?
I wish I had known that the body is not meant to be constantly fed. So like early in my career as a sport dietitian, and even like in the process of school for nutrition, there's constant rhetoric around athletes need to be fueling all day, every day because they're burning so much and da-da-da-da. And like, I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I do think it isn't the best long-term strategy for an athlete. Now, granted, most of us in the sport nutrition community are working with athletes for a very specific chunk of time, whether that be the years they're in college or the years of their professional career or whatever. But I have taken the specific mission of my practice to be, I want to teach long-term lessons. And part of that is the idea of we're not meant to be constantly fed. And that's not a plug for like intermittent fasting or anything like that. Although I do believe, that it can be a useful strategy for the right people. And I don't necessarily believe athletes should be doing that specific strategy. But I do think there is something to letting the body figure something out naturally. And I think if we are constantly introducing food and nutrients to it, we don't allow it that time to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think we can explore this a little further to make the point for those who aren't here, who aren't here with us right now. But I'll start with this. It's the beauty of the intermittent metabolic switch, right? Is that what you're describing? It's like if we are if we can establish some degree of ketosis throughout the day, independent of fasting, like if we spend significant enough time between meals to allow our body to achieve a ketogenic state, a low blood glucose state per se, then we can orchestrate a lot of the evolutionarily preserved mechanisms that give us and reward us with this amazing quality of life. Like we were not designed. We spent millions of years without the super convenient access to highly processed foods that we have nowadays. Anytime we have an urge, a craving, we can immediately satisfy that. And that's a problem, right? So maybe this can help bridge the gap, but please, I would love to keep this conversation going, this specific one, because I think this is absolutely priceless. And I'm so glad that you shared this of all things with our audience.
Yeah, I think you're touching on like the physiology behind what I'm talking about. I wouldn't necessarily say, because I think I hesitate to say like get into a state of ketosis and that kind of thing, because I think it's a little too sexy for the science. Like I think it's, cool. I think using stuff like that like sends people down a rabbit hole of like, okay, how do I eat but get in ketosis, but like I don't know. Anyways, so, but yes, you touch on the evolutionary side of things, which is frankly like we didn't always have food readily available. And now let me be clear, like, because I don't want sports dietitians coming after me for saying that athletes shouldn't be eating every 2 hours or every hour or whatever. Like, there are very specific cases where that's an absolutely appropriate strategy. Like, especially if you have like a weight gain athlete who, can't eat more at meals, so they just have to eat more meals. If you need to use consistent feeding as a strategy for something, fine. In the same way that if you need to use intermittent fasting as a strategy for something, fine. I personally believe in switching things up and like kind of surprising the body in many ways. Like I think that that's a good longevity strategy. So being again, this is
opportunistic feeder, but not eating processed junk that is like readily available.
Yeah, 100%. I do believe strongly we are a product of our food environment. So like if I'm working with, whether it be a private client that's just a general recreational exerciser or it's my athletes, like I am addressing food environment. I'm asking questions like, well, what do you have laying around the house? Who does the grocery shopping? Like, what do you have consistently available? And that's also one of the best touch points I have with my athletes is like, if I know that the environment they're walking into at our facility or on the road is all healthy food, that's fine. Like eat what you want if it's in front of you, because I know it's healthy. As opposed to like when they're at home and outside of, our control as an not as an organization, but like my knowledge as a dietitian, like they're going to be, everybody succumbs to cravings. Everybody succumbs to temptation when it comes to food. And like once in a while is not going to kill you at all. I'm a big fan of moderation. But it really depends on your goals that will dictate like what kind of food environment you need to be in.
And what would you have to say about like the gap in evolution between the rapid evolution of our technology and the slower evolution of our physiology? There's this like gap in evolution, and I honestly think that the word, like, I think biohacking is like the effort to like try to bring those things as closely together as possible and to help our body either evolve or to try and mitigate the damage of this gap in evolution. What do you have to say about that?
What I said at the beginning of the podcast, I think holds true, that like there's so much that we still don't know about physiology and performance and health and all that. And I do believe in these technologies that are like helping us to learn those things. With how much technology is coming out, I always question validity. And I'm like, show me your peer-reviewed research that shows that your product is doing what you're telling me it's doing. But let's, for argument's sake, say that everything is valid or whatever. Like, I think it can be super interesting. But it's in the same way that if a client asks me if they should start counting calories, my assessment of before I answer yes or no is going to be, what is that going to do for you and for your mental state? Because if you are the type of person who wants to know this information and will use it for good and not evil, great. It can be an extremely valuable tool. But at the end of the day, it's a tool, and it shouldn't be like Bible, you know, it shouldn't be the end all be all of what you're doing and how you're understanding yourself. So I would say the same thing for these technologies, is that super cool and amazing and can give us a lot of information, but like, what are you going to do with the information? And will it send you down a negative spiral if you get what you deem to be negative information?
So it seems to me like what you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like it's very important for you with your clients to help them build some intuition around food, right?
100%. Everybody eats every day. So like to build intuition around food is like, to me, the utmost form of education beyond health and unhealthy or whatever.
And do you believe that a lot of this data and information can and should serve as like the backbone of our intuition?
I think it can. And I do think it should. It's kind of a tough way to put it. It's almost too black and white.
Yeah, I was going to say, my follow-up question was like, because obviously there's a lot of marketing around food. Like there's a lot of things that trick our psychology and our intuition. There's greenwashing. There's trillions of dollars going into marketing. Like we like when we step into a grocery store, we're at a disadvantage, you know? So my follow-up question was, how do you think we can realistically build that healthy level of intuition with food, considering the vast amount of information around it, whether it's science or whether it's total bullshit? How do we build intuition around food in this modern day?
Having conversations. It's so
tough. Excuse me, hold on. Because as a physiologist, I can sense the buildup in your CO2 in that sigh. It is a loaded question.
It's not even that it's like a loaded question. It's just a tough one.
It's a tough question, but hey, I think that's why we're doing this show, right? Like,
yeah,
we have the time to try and answer this question, and even if you and I can't answer it, I think it shows people how much there's left to know and to discover, because everybody wants intuition. Everybody wants access to the right information and to the healthiest foods. But this is how difficult it is. Two people that are deeply and intimately invested in this field can't even have a conversation. I mean, we are having a conversation, but we can't give you a clear answer, right? And every time someone shows up in a grocery store, they expect answers, whether it's conscious or subconscious. They expect to make the right decisions. So hopefully this can help them, not by giving them the answer, but by showing them that even we have difficulty answering this question.
And you touched on, I think, what my answer would be, and that's A, conversation. So like, that's what we're doing. And B, honesty and like grace for life getting in the way of what would be deemed right or wrong. Like, I hate using right and wrong when it comes to food and nutrition, because like that's too black and white. There's literally too much gray area to be using such definitive terms like good, bad, right, wrong. I don't like it. So I think the best way is to just keep having conversations. Hopefully people having these conversations on platforms that can reach more and more people is the way to do it. And that goes back to like finding credible sources like we talked about earlier. And it's really like, this is going to be so cynical of me to say, but like a lot of it comes down to money when it comes to marketing and pushing foods and like all those things. And that's not to say there aren't amazing companies out there who are doing what they do because they wanted to create a better product for people's lives and health and longevity. But those companies are typically funded way less than those who are just out to sell a product and have a whole staff of marketing people that train in psychology of people going through the grocery store. So it's like when it comes to like, we have to take it upon ourselves because the industry is not going to do it for us is what I tell clients. Like you have to educate yourself to push through the BS that exists in the media and the marketing in the world around us and learn as much as you can about nutrition and your physiology so that way you can make informed decisions.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're familiar, well, obviously you're familiar with like the NOVA classification for levels of food processing. And I'm pretty sure, I'm actually on the website, on one of the websites now, but like the ultra processed foods, like one of the characteristics, literally a characteristic is like they are marketed. They're so heavily marketed, right? And it's like, whereas like the group 1 unprocessed foods, they have no marketing. It's like vegetables don't need any marketing. So it's like any food that makes a claim that it's healthy is probably not healthy. Would you agree or disagree?
What's interesting
in a grocery store.
In a grocery store, yeah. What's interesting is that there are federal regulations around like using the word healthy. So to use the word healthy on labels, it actually does come with some bearing of like, it has to be under a certain amount of calories, certain percent fat, certain amount of cholesterol and sodium and those things. The problem with just using those types of terms is that what's healthy for one person might not be healthy for another.
Right.
And that goes back to the individualization and gaining a better understanding of those things. So when I, like you said, people are always looking for what's the easiest way that I can eat healthy, quote unquote. And I always say like the closer to how it came out of the earth, the better. So fruits and vegetables, stuff that doesn't have a great shelf life, it's going to go bad in your fridge in a week. That means you got to eat it. Like there's nothing wrong with going through the aisles and getting packaged foods or whatever that does have a shelf life. But I believe the foundation of someone's diet and the vast majority of someone's diet should be stuff that would go bad in your fridge in a week and like is just that whole food kind of stuff.
Cool. And then not aside, but rather complementary to intuition, what kind of testing do we need to do to figure out what's the healthiest food for us?
That's a tough one because there's a ton of tests that exist that allege that they can tell you what foods are best for you. I have not seen enough solid research to stand by those tests. I think the best test is literally the gut test. It is
which
what
one?
Do you?
Oh,
no,
just
like
right.
your
like
gut.
Listen to your gut.
Like,
yeah.
Do you, which is like a form of intuition, but it's like intuition with tangible outcomes. So like if you eat something and then you're like pooping your brains out, probably not the best food for you to be eating. If you eat something and every time you eat it, you feel lethargic afterwards, probably not the best thing for you to be eating. So like reminding people that everything you eat and drink becomes the fuel for everything your body does. So if you can become more intuitive and in tune with your body and how it's reacting to things, you really can sift through this like roadmap in and of itself. Your body like will show you the like what it doesn't like, but you just have to be paying attention to those messages. No, that to me, that's a better way of testing, because I think the food sensitivity tests that exist or the gut tests that exist, the way that they measure things is based primarily off of like what enzymes are present in your gut, right? The enzymes and stuff that are present in your gut are going to be the ones that are related to whatever foods you consistently eat. So I don't see those tests being a true measure of like what your gut can and cannot handle, because you are introducing those tests to an already biased environment of your gut. So that's why so many people who do food sensitivity tests, they come back and they're like, oh my God, I'm a high reactor to bell peppers, but I eat bell peppers all the time. Like, how is this possible? Do I have to stop eating bell peppers? And it's like, well, no, you don't necessarily. Do you feel like shit after you eat bell peppers? Then yeah, you should probably stop eating them. But if you don't, the test isn't a black and white definitive of cut all these foods out and you'll optimize your life like that. It just doesn't work as simply as that.
Right. And what are some habits and lifestyle systems that we need to add in to develop the necessary intuition to choose the best foods for our physiology?
People aren't naturally born with this intuition, or maybe I think we are naturally born with it, but especially the American environment is so inundated with information all the time that I think a lot of people have become reliant on getting their information from like externally as opposed to looking internally. So it's like hard to just say that there's specific ways and specific systems that people can utilize in order to build their intuition. When to me, the answer is like, just sit down and think and be quiet and be observant and be present. Yeah, that's like the word for it. So I think a short, like a simple tool when it comes to nutrition and intuition is keep a food diary. I think that's the easiest way to be present when it comes to food and beverage.
What is a food diary?
And then work with it. Oh yeah. So just essentially writing down everything you eat and drink and when you do it and how you. I mean, that works too. But the important thing about a diary is correlating it with how you feel. So it's to keep a food diary, like ideally what you'd be doing is writing when and what you have, and then like 30, 60 minutes later, noting how you feel. And okay. That's the best way to start putting patterns to things if you aren't intuitive on your own with your food intake.
Right. It's like your personal N of 1 clinical trial. And then you get to see what works and what doesn't. That is the scientific version of intuition, is an N of 1 clinical trial on everything. Awesome. Wow. And are there any technologies that you can use to gain objective data that might show or reveal how you feel and are reacting to these foods? Like, for example, can you wear a wearable device that shows you your HRV, and can you say, oh, I had this food at night or in the day and look at my HRV? Like, are there any different metrics that we can look at that will help us build this intuition, or will help us put objective data, we'll pair it with our thoughts and feelings? I think using technologies that already exist, you can glean some information about relating your nutrition habits to specific outcomes. My first thought is sleep. I think that if you pay attention to sleep data and there's drastic changes and you can relate that to drastic changes in the diet, I think that that's an indicator. And kind of vice versa. See, this the problem is that, like, if you're sleeping like crap, research shows you're more likely to eat like crap. And then it's like this vicious cycle of like, you keep doing one and then the other. So there isn't anything specific to nutrition. Like, to short answer your question, I am not aware of a technology that is specific to allowing you to track your nutrition subjective outcomes and relate it directly to objective outcomes like HRV and sleep and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that doesn't exist. I'm just not aware of it. And also, it sounds really freaking complicated. Whereas like having just like a notebook for a week and just like writing stuff down
to me makes a little bit more sense, but I'm sure there's somebody working on that.
Emily,
like technology
50 business partners, let's get started. This is the $1 billion question. Yeah. I think there's room for innovation there, right? Yeah, there's clearly some room for innovation. I mean, that could be a really interesting question to explore, right? And project to innovate on.
Yeah, I mean, like off the top of my head, I'm thinking of there's a handful of companies I'm aware of who all do different aspects of like what we're talking about, but it's kind of a culmination of all of those things that would be super, super difficult. But then we go back to the question of like, what are people going to do with that information?
Right.
Like, is that the quick hack they're looking for? I don't know. But sure. Yeah. 50-50. I'm in.
Cool. Man, I'm just trying to take all this in because I hope that this conversation doesn't lead to, I mean, obviously you're not having a great time talking about this, but I hope it doesn't lead my audience to more confusion or to any stress. I know a lot of people are looking for simple answers, and intuition seems like it's a simple thing that is so individual to everyone and so personal to everyone. But yeah, I mean, I think that these modern lives really take away from our intuition. Like, for example, doom scrolling, or like, I don't know, like there's so many things that take away from this intuition. I wish it was more simple, because that should lay the foundation for all kinds of healthy habits, beyond food, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're intuitive, then maybe you can figure out how hard should you go in the gym today, and how long should you spend recovering? What time should you go to sleep? When should you wake up? Like there's so many things that intuition can help us, become healthier through. So man, that's a fascinating topic.
It's not an easy one. Like it is an easy one, but it's not the answer that people want, because it actually requires like work and practice. I don't think you become intuitive overnight. It's taken me years, and I'm very biased in the fact that I've been educating myself in this for many years. I've gone through formal schooling and informal schooling to do this. So it's like, I acknowledge how much it's taken me, and I was greatly assisted by an entire academic system to do it.
Right.
So for just the average person who's just trying to figure out what works for them, like it's tough, and you're constantly inundated by information of people with quick hacks, and then you want to try those because it's easier than trying to learn intuition and all of that. So like I get it, and I do empathize with the audience, because I used to be that person. But I just encourage people to do it in the same way you encourage people to know their physiology. Know your intuition. Like the more you can do that, just the better life you're going to live in general.
Yeah. I always say that, like, know your physio. And honestly, the reason why I came up with that name and the brand mission is that I think that it sets the foundation for what eventually becomes, and hopefully becomes, intuition and interoception, that deep bodily awareness. And that's really the mission at the end of the day. The mission is to build that. And so it's interesting that we arrived at this question naturally, but it's really the question that I want people to ask themselves all the time. What can I learn about my science to optimize my life? But really what that means is like develop the necessary intuition to make the best decisions for the best quality of life, the quality of life that nature intended for me. And it's really cool that something as simple but not easy, at the level of our mitochondria, can help us, improve the odds of that coming to life. No pun intended. So I know that we're short on time here. This has been so much fun. I have two last questions for you. First question is, if you could put a word, phrase, or sentence on a billboard somewhere in the world, what would it say, and where would you put it?
I often joke that if I wrote a book, I would call it "It's Okay to Eat Ice Cream."
I love ice cream.
Who doesn't?
What are your favorite ice cream flavors? Just out of curiosity.
I gotta say, like, mint chocolate chip probably is is up there, or it just depends on the mood that I'm in. But yeah, mint chocolate chip or like something peanut butter chocolate.
Yes, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a peanut butter chocolate guy, pistachio, like a gelato, pistachio gelato and hazelnut. Those are my top flavors right there. Anyway, why would you write a book? Why would you write a book with that name? And why would that be the phrase that you're going to put on the billboard?
I think it actually plays into this whole conversation about intuition that we're having, because ice cream and treat foods and that kind of stuff are so demonized, especially in like the nutrition and health space world, that I think people need a reminder that it's okay to eat ice cream and it's okay to live life and have a quality of life while still trying to optimize your health and achieve your goals. So my book would be about nutrition and healthful practices, but it would also be about grace and intuition and it being okay to eat ice cream.
That's lovely. And where, if you had to pick one or maybe two places to put this billboard, where do you think it'd make the most sense?
Ooh.
Anywhere. It can be, and by the way, it can be on the world, it can be on the moon, it can be on a satellite, anywhere.
I would put it, oh my God, this is going to be so controversial. I'd put it in like every gym everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Like, just because I think that I want to tackle these people who have such a black and white view on health. Like, I just don't think that that's, if they want to do that for themselves, that's fine. Maybe I want to put it on like social media so that the people who are touting that kind of idea have to see it.
Right.
Because I wholeheartedly believe that is not the way to go about this, like this life. And especially if you try to be in a position of helping people, like I don't see such strictness as a way to help people.
And you personally, we talked about our favorite flavors, but how would you describe the perfect ice cream as far as ingredients go?
as close to the earth as it can.
So like whole butter, whole grass-fed, grass-finished butter, whole milk, no sugar, maybe some maple syrup. What else? Some Redmond sea salt or Redmond salt. I don't think it's sea salt. Redmond salt.
A little bit of salt. Yeah, I mean, just whole ingredients. Like put some fruit in there. Like get those nutrients. If you're gonna use chocolate, do either like a raw cacao or something that just is sweetened with anything besides something fake. Like, it's not gonna be the most light caloric density food, but it will be delicious.
But it will power your mitochondria.
Will power the mitochondria.
Awesome. Emily, what an honor and pleasure. This has been so much fun. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
So my website is eateliteperform.com. And my personal Instagram is at Emily N. Werner 34, but that's more like personal. I sometimes post things about what I do in the NBA, but I would say my website is definitely the best starting point.
Amazing. Well, hey, thank you so much. This has been such an honor and pleasure, so much fun, and we hope to have you back on the podcast in the near future.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.